In a moment no one saw coming, Queen Camilla lost her composure during a live interview, her voice cracking as she responded to growing public resentment about her title. Her carefully curated image shattered in seconds, and what spilled out exposed a deeper crisis inside the monarchy. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The broadcast had been marketed as routine, a light conversation to reflect on the king's first year and the queen's evolving role. But just minutes into the segment, tension began to simmer beneath Camilla's polished responses. The interviewer, a respected yet famously unflinching figure, pivoted abruptly to the growing backlash surrounding her title as queen. What followed wasn't the poised response the palace had rehearsed. It was a moment of raw emotion that exposed far more than anyone expected. Camilla's voice faltered, her eyes welled, her carefully composed posture broke. With millions watching, she stumbled through a sentence that trailed into silence. Then, with one shaking breath, she whispered, "I never asked for this." The room fell still. The interviewer froze. Seconds later, the network cut abruptly to commercial no warning, no explanation. That one moment detonated across the internet like a bomb. Within minutes, hashtags like #Queen Camilla Breakdown and #Royal Meltdown began trending worldwide. Social media platforms filled with split reactions, some viewers moved to tears, others calling it a calculated performance. Camilla had spent decades rebuilding her public image, transforming from a controversial figure into a royal fixture. But all of that crumbled in real time, and the cracks were now impossible to ignore. The palace responded swiftly, but with remarkable vagueness. "No comment at this time," the official statement read, but silence only deepened the speculation. Was Camilla pushed too far? Was this an emotional collapse? Or a moment of truth finally surfacing after years of restraint? The unanswered questions fueled media frenzy and public outrage, while behind palace gates, a very different conversation was unfolding. Insiders reported a frantic atmosphere, calls between advisors, emergency meetings, and senior aides ushered in to manage the spiraling damage. And at the center of it all was a woman who, for the first time, seemed visibly crushed by the weight of a crown that never quite fit. What had been planned as a soft feature interview had instead triggered a seismic shift in public perception. What began as a single question now threatened to unravel the delicate fabric of the monarchy's public narrative. But Camilla's breakdown wasn't just about that interview. It was the culmination of months of unspoken tension, quiet resentment, and a storm that had been gathering in the shadows long before the cameras ever rolled. But to understand the weight behind Camilla's breakdown, we must go back to the firestorm that's been building behind palace walls for months. Behind every royal title lies a battlefield, and for Camilla, the crown has never come without blood. Criticism has followed her since the moment Charles took the throne, but recent events pushed her to the brink. From the moment the Archbishop placed the crown upon her head, the title Queen Camilla ignited a reaction that few within the palace truly anticipated. While royal tradition called for unity, the public response was anything but. What began as grumbling dissent quickly transformed into an avalanche of backlash. Commentators declared it tone-deaf. Protesters gathered in London's busiest squares. Online forums exploded with fury, many declaring her title an insult to Diana's memory. Opinion polls painted a damning picture, especially among the younger generation, where support for the monarchy was already fragile. Camilla's image, carefully rehabilitated over 2 decades, now teetered on the edge of collapse, and she knew it. High-profile voices only poured more fuel on the fire. Celebrity figures, influential journalists, and even former royal staffers began speaking out, questioning not just Camilla's role, but her right to it. Some accused the palace of rewriting history. Others claimed it was a betrayal of the public's trust. But the most haunting attacks came not from loud voices, but quiet ones, handwritten letters from Diana supporters, mailed to Clarence House, pleading with the king to revoke the title. A few were respectful. Others were disturbingly personal. And though royal staff tried to shield her, Camilla read them. Every single one. Charles, fiercely protective in public, reportedly worked behind the scenes to limit the exposure. He instructed aides to filter media briefings, cancelled Camilla's appearances at several high-profile events, and redirected public focus to William and Catherine. But the gesture, though well-intentioned, only deepened her isolation. It became a silence that screamed. To many on the outside, she had vanished. But on the inside, she was still there, watching, absorbing, and slowly unraveling. Insiders later revealed that Camilla became increasingly withdrawn during this period. She cancelled private lunches, ignored calls, refused to meet with longtime friends. Her closest staff began raising quiet concerns about her emotional well-being, noting how uncharacteristically she began to question her decisions, her place, and ultimately, her purpose. For a woman who had spent years building resilience against the public's disdain, something had finally broken. The title she wore was no longer a symbol of triumph. It was a target. But the most dangerous battles are never fought in public. They're the ones waged in whispers, behind locked doors, with names never spoken aloud. And Camilla was about to learn that the fiercest resistance she faced wasn't from protesters outside the gates, but from those who walked the corridors of power beside her. And just as the pressure mounted outside the palace, Camilla faced a silent war brewing from within. It's not just the public questioning Camilla's right to the title, it's also members of the royal family. Cold shoulders, whispered doubts, and outright defiance have quietly eroded the foundations of her authority. Inside the walls of the palace, respect is often delivered with a smile and withdrawn in silence. And for Camilla, the silence was growing deafening. Despite public unity and staged photo calls, it became increasingly clear that certain members of the firm had not, and perhaps never would, fully accept her as queen. Among the most telling fractures was Princess Anne's stoic, traditional, and fiercely loyal to the memory of her late mother and Diana. Rumours from multiple court insiders claimed Anne had quietly refused to refer to Camilla by her official title in private, opting instead for more neutral or even outdated terms. It wasn't confrontation, it was calculated exclusion, the kind that cuts more deeply because it's never spoken aloud. Then there was Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Once seen as a potential ally to Camilla, she too had begun to pull away. Invitations declined, messages unanswered, appearances increasingly distant. What had once seemed like camaraderie among senior royal women was now little more than formal obligation. Tension simmered further when Prince William's household allegedly intercepted a briefing containing a veiled remark from Camilla's team, one that reportedly questioned Catherine's rising popularity and media dominance. The fallout was swift. Courtiers on both sides shut down communication, and a frosty, performative unity replaced genuine interaction. Whatever warmth once existed had frozen, but the real breaking point came quietly. At a private reception at Sandringham, Camilla, surrounded by donors, dignitaries, and a handful of royals, was overheard whispering to a confidant, "I'll never be enough, no matter what I do." That single sentence, spoken not into a microphone but to the air between two people, was relayed across palace halls like wildfire. It wasn't just an admission of exhaustion, it was a confession of defeat. The fracture wasn't just emotional, it was operational. Camilla's staff, once seamlessly integrated into the royal machinery, now found themselves increasingly isolated. Requests ignored, proposals denied. The divide between her team and the rest of the royal household grew starker by the day. One insider described it as a quiet mutiny, no rebellion, no refusal, just a systematic closing of doors. And at the center of it all stood Charles, caught in a devastating tug-of-war between personal loyalty and royal legacy. For all his devotion to Camilla, even he began to withdraw from key moments. Whispers suggested that in private meetings, he hesitated to bring up her name. That in moments of crisis, he looked elsewhere for counsel. Whether out of strategic necessity or emotional fatigue, the king's distance deepened Camilla's isolation and confirmed to many that the monarchy's center was beginning to splinter from within. But the whispers inside the palace were nothing compared to the secrets being stirred by those on the outside. In a chilling development, a confidential internal memo was leaked, revealing just how deep the cracks within the monarchy run. The contents were explosive, and Camilla was right at the center. The memo wasn't meant to see daylight. Stamped, strictly private, senior eyes only. It was circulated quietly among the highest levels of royal advisors. Its purpose? To outline contingency steps should Camilla, Queen Consort, choose or be forced to reduce her public role. The language was cold, calculated, and strategic. Terms like diminished public confidence and optics re-evaluation weren't just buried between lines, they were underlined. It was clear. Behind the polished smiles and ceremonial elegance, the palace was already preparing for the worst. And in those preparations, Camilla's name was being discussed as a liability, not an asset. No one expected it to surface. But an anonymous insider, someone with direct access, leaked the entire document to a foreign publication known for exposing royal secrets. Within hours, it was online, translated, dissected, and viral. News outlets scrambled, headlines screamed betrayal, and within the palace walls, panic set in. An immediate internal investigation was launched. Staff phones were seized, interviews conducted behind closed doors, but the leak had done its damage. The illusion of unity had shattered, and trust inside the palace crumbled faster than anyone could contain. For Camilla, the blow was personal. She reportedly learned of the leak during a scheduled briefing. What began as a routine discussion about upcoming appearances turned into an ambush of headlines and raw humiliation. As aides attempted to steer the conversation back to protocol, Camilla stood up mid-meeting, silent, pale, and stunned. Moments later, she left the room and did not return. Sources say she wept behind closed doors, not because of the headlines, but because of what the memo revealed. The very people meant to protect her were already plotting her retreat. Royal aides worked frantically to spin the story. They insisted it was standard protocol, a hypothetical scenario drafted in every royal transition. But the public wasn't buying it. The language was too targeted, the timing too precise. And the narrative that Camilla's role was under reconsideration, however unofficial, unleashed a frenzy. Commentators debated whether her reign as Queen Consort had an expiration date. Conspiracy theories flourished. Even Camilla's closest allies began to question how long she could endure such relentless pressure. Within hours, Buckingham Palace's control over the narrative had all but vanished. The leak wasn't just an embarrassment. It was a declaration that even inside the royal fortress, faith in Camilla was wavering. And it begged the question: if her position was truly secure, why were backup plans already being drafted in secret? But the crisis was far from over. Because just as the monarchy scrambled to patch one leak, a far more powerful force stirred beyond the palace gates, one that had shaped the public's perception of Camilla from the very beginning. As the royal institution worked overtime to spin control, a voice from the past came roaring back into public memory. Try as they might, the palace has never escaped the shadow of Diana. And for Camilla, every move, every misstep, is still judged against a ghost who never left the hearts of millions. In the wake of the leaked memo, the royal family had barely begun damage control when a second wave of emotional reckoning came crashing down this time, driven not by politics or strategy, but by memory. Archival footage of Princess Diana began resurfacing across every major platform. Her interviews, once seen as brave and vulnerable, were now reinterpreted through a sharper lens. Clips where she spoke of feeling like three of us in this marriage went viral once again. Viewers, many too young to have witnessed her story firsthand, now dissected every word as a prophecy. The comparisons were instantaneous. Diana's warmth versus Camilla's restraint, Diana's pain versus Camilla's privilege. And just like that, Camilla's already fragile image was thrust into another storm, one shaped not by present actions, but by unresolved legacy. Social media became the new battlefield. Influencers, royal analysts, and content creators flooded timelines with side-by-side visual essays, contrasting how Diana and Camilla carried the same title in such drastically different ways. Hashtags like #Queen of Hearts and #NotMyQueen surged, with millions reposting images of Diana wearing a tiara next to clips of Camilla struggling to hold back tears. And then came the letter. Unearthed from a private collection and authenticated by a former aide, it was handwritten by Diana months before her death. In it, she confessed a quiet fear that one day the monarchy would rewrite her pain in the name of restoration. Though the wording was vague, the implication was devastating. To the public, it read like a warning, and Camilla's reign was seen as the fulfillment of it. Inside the palace, the atmosphere turned suffocating. Charles, already overwhelmed by political pressure and familial tension, reportedly grew angry at the endless recycling of Diana's image. He saw it as weaponized grief, a refusal to let the present stand on its own. But rage couldn't stop the rising tide of sentiment, and Camilla, caught between a husband she loved and a public that never fully accepted her, felt the strain with every headline. Her closest friends later revealed she had confided feelings of deep alienation, saying, "No matter what I do, I'm still the woman who came after her." The words hung heavy in the air, a reminder that even a crown couldn't shield her from the legacy she was forced to follow. As tributes to Diana flooded the airwaves once more, Camilla found herself erased from the narrative of her own queenship. Every effort she had made to serve, to smile, to rise beyond the past, was met with a chorus of reminders that she could never truly replace what was lost. In the hearts of millions, Diana had never left, and in the mind of Camilla, that truth echoed louder than any royal title. With public opinion spiraling and family loyalty fading, Charles was forced into an impossible position. Behind closed doors, King Charles faced the most painful decision of his reign, whether to defend his wife against the monarchy's crumbling image or preserve the crown by distancing himself from her entirely. The pressure inside Buckingham Palace had reached a fever pitch. Public faith was collapsing. Camilla's breakdown had become the most talked-about royal moment since Diana's bombshell interview, and every poll, every headline, every whisper outside the palace walls demanded a response. The monarch was no longer being asked to lead with dignity, he was being pushed to choose. Senior advisors, led by a long-trusted group of palace veterans, laid their strategy on the table in one word: containment. The solution, they argued, was to neutralize the narrative, not with confrontation, but with calculated distance. Camilla, they claimed, had become too volatile, too emotionally exposed. If the monarchy was to survive this storm, they insisted, Charles needed to quietly step back from her side, not publicly, not cruelly, just enough to signal that the crown stood apart from the chaos she was pulling into its orbit. But Camilla wasn't going quietly. In private, she confronted Charles with a fury that stunned even their inner circle. She demanded he issue a public defense, something firm, clear, and unequivocal. She needed to hear him say, before the world, that her title was legitimate and her place beside him was non-negotiable. But Charles hesitated, not because he lacked love, but because the institution was gasping for air. He knew that even a single misstep could spark irreversible damage. Advisors warned him that speaking out could reignite Republican calls, damage the Commonwealth's trust, and weaken his son's succession. The burden of the crown, once ceremonial, now weighed like a chain around his judgment. The argument between Charles and Camilla, according to palace insiders, became a turning point. He refused to issue the statement. She called it betrayal. For the first time in their reign, they reportedly spent nights in separate quarters, not out of symbolic distancing, but because the tension had made shared space unbearable. Aides who had once commented on their deep connection now described an atmosphere of silence, retreat, and grief. One insider revealed, "The king is at war with himself. His loyalty is torn between the woman he loves and the legacy he must protect." And still, the public waited. Every day without a word from Charles deepened the sense that something irreversible was unfolding behind the gilded walls. Camilla, stripped of public support and royal reassurance, began making plans, but not the kind her advisors had expected. She wasn't preparing to step down. She was preparing to speak unfiltered, unapproved, and without palace permission. And then came the final blow, Camilla's decision to break her silence. live and unfiltered. It was meant to be a controlled conversation, a soft interview to reset her public image. But what unfolded was a raw, emotional implosion that no one could have scripted. After weeks of silence and speculation, Camilla re-emerged in front of the cameras, but not through a palace-sanctioned speech or a carefully worded press release. She sat down with a seasoned royal journalist known for her diplomatic tone and credibility, hoping this one-on-one conversation would humanize her, calm the narrative, and close the chapter on the storm that had engulfed her title. From the moment it began, there was an air of restraint, tight smiles, clipped answers, and a visible tension that betrayed how deeply fractured the Queen Consort had become under public scrutiny. At first, the questions focused on charity work, family life, and the future of the monarchy. But then, the tone shifted. The journalist, gently but firmly, addressed the growing wave of criticism surrounding Camilla's title and public role. What followed was a moment of unfiltered vulnerability. Camilla's words slowed. Her eyes dropped. Her breath caught in her throat. She began to speak, then paused, visibly overwhelmed. "I've spent years trying to serve," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "and yet I'm still struggling with being seen as something I'm not." That sentence alone rippled through the room like a silent explosion. She continued, her voice cracking. "People have already made up their minds about me, and I've been relentlessly judged for a crown I didn't ask for." The silence that followed was suffocating. The journalist reached for the next question, but Camilla was already unraveling. Her composure broke. The words stopped making sense. Her voice wavered as she tried to defend her place in the monarchy, but every sentence trailed off into a silence heavier than the last. Staff reportedly signaled for a break, but it was too late. The moment had spiraled out of control, and the interview was halted entirely. The broadcast team scrambled to recover, and within hours, the network issued a statement confirming the segment would be aired heavily edited to protect the dignity of the Queen Consort. The version that reached the public was sanitized. A few awkward pauses, a strained smile, a clipped quote about duty, but it wasn't enough. Whispers of what really happened spread like wildfire among insiders, and by morning, leaks from within the production team began flooding private forums and journalist inboxes. The version the world saw was a mask. The real footage, they said, showed something far more heartbreaking. Something that wasn't fit for air, but was too explosive to stay hidden forever. And, as the palace attempted to push forward, unaware of the storm building beneath the surface, one thing became painfully clear: this wasn't the image rehabilitation Camilla had hoped for. It was a trigger, a mirror, and soon, the world would be holding up the reflection she tried desperately to avoid. But the unedited footage would soon find its way into the public, and once it did, the world saw a very different Camilla. The footage leaked, the tears went viral, and the fallout was immediate, dividing the public, inflaming the press, and pushing the royal family into a new level of chaos. Within hours of the edited interview airing, an anonymous source uploaded the uncut version to an underground video platform. No branding, no watermark, just the raw, unfiltered breakdown of the Queen Consort. The footage spread like wildfire, re-uploaded to every social platform, dissected by influencers, memed, shared, weaponized. In the video, Camilla's voice trembled with vulnerability, her sentences spiraling into emotion, her usually stoic presence reduced to something achingly human. But instead of sparking empathy, the internet split in two. One half wept for her, the other called it a performance. Some praised the honesty. They saw a woman worn down by pressure, vilified by the legacy of a ghost she could never compete with. Hashtags like #NotMyQueen and #UnFitToRule began trending, fueled by reaction videos, scathing think pieces, and televised panels debating the Queen's mental fortitude. Protesters returned to the gates of Buckingham Palace, this time with signs that didn't just question her title but demanded her removal. "She doesn't speak for us," one read. She never did. Inside the palace, morale plummeted. Camilla's personal staff, once loyal to the end, were rumoured to be seeking transfers or quietly resigning. One aide described the atmosphere as emotionally radioactive. Communications were frozen. Public appearances were scrubbed from the calendar. Every scheduled event was suddenly under review. The palace, known for its unshakable silence, began showing cracks. Official statements were brief and brittle, offering no defense and even less clarity. That silence only intensified speculation that the monarchy was preparing for something drastic. Newspaper front pages were ruthless. Crown without confidence, royal reckoning, the queen who couldn't reign. The most brutal headlines didn't just criticize, they mocked. Editors and columnists pulled no punches. Even traditionally pro-monarchy voices began raising concerns about the viability of Camilla's future as queen consort. And still, Charles said nothing. That silence was interpreted as distance, if not quiet endorsement of the storm overtaking his wife. But perhaps the most damning signal came not from the public or the press, but from inside the monarchy's own communications machine. Leaked internal emails revealed that palace staff had advised all royal representatives to de-escalate commentary and not engage in debate about the Queen's emotional state. In other words, stay quiet. Let the storm pass. But this wasn't a storm. It was an earthquake, and while the institution scrambled to stay upright, Camilla, shamed, isolated, but still holding on to what little power she had left, was already planning her response. Not through aides, not through protocol, but in her own voice, with no filter and no palace approval. But in the middle of the storm, Camilla made one final move, bold, controversial, and unexpected. Camilla emerged from the shadows to make a bold declaration, one that caught even her closest allies off guard. With the nation watching, she did what no one anticipated. In a move that stunned the palace and rattled the foundations of royal protocol, Camilla bypassed all official communication channels and issued a personal statement to the press. It wasn't polished. It wasn't filtered through the cautious hands of royal aides. It was raw, intentional, and searing in its honesty. Camilla declared in her own words that while her position may be complicated, she would never apologize for love. The statement didn't ask for sympathy. It demanded recognition. She acknowledged the criticism, the weight of history, and the impossible comparisons, but refused to shrink from them. It was the voice of a woman who had been vilified and dismissed, yet remained unbroken. The response was immediate and ferocious. Across social media, the public fractured into warring factions. Some called it the most dignified thing she had ever done, finally stepping out of the shadows to claim her truth. Others saw it as defiance, a calculated act of rebellion that disrespected the traditions she had promised to uphold. Headlines shifted tone from speculation to chaos. Queen goes rogue, palace power vacuum, Camilla's last stand. Within royal circles, there was panic. No one had been briefed. Not even the king. The communication teams scrambled to catch up, fielding questions from journalists who had already published every word of the unapproved message. Palace sources described the corridors as tense, with senior aides calling emergency meetings to assess reputational damage. But it was Charles's silence that shook the monarchy the most. He issued no response, no appearance, no sign of support. That silence echoed louder than any formal denial. Behind the scenes, speculation soared. Was this a coordinated act that went off script, or a queen finally acting alone after feeling abandoned one too many times? Some insiders whispered that Camilla had warned him she would speak. Others insisted he found out when the rest of the world did. Regardless of the truth, the rift was now undeniable. The question was no longer about titles or press management. It was about survival. For a woman who had fought for years to be accepted, this was either her last battle or the moment she rewrote her role entirely. As the dust settled, one truth loomed over the entire institution. Camilla had crossed a line. Whether it was courage or desperation, it had altered the monarchy's trajectory. And in doing so, she made it impossible for anyone to pretend this was just another royal controversy. The stakes were now existential. Because Camilla's crown was never simply adorned with jewels, It was built from public scorn, hardened expectations, and a love story that never asked permission. And now, as the monarchy teeters on another precipice, one truth has become impossible to ignore. Camilla's crown was never just made of gold, it was forged in fire. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.